Hello, I'm Andrei from PSDBox, and today I have a portrait effect tutorial for you, and I want to show you how you can turn this image into something like this. So I want to show you how to create this color effects and this smooth portrait effect that you can see here. So I hope you will like it. We will use a few adjustment layers, some skin smoothening and basic hair masking, and also we'll create this out of focus background for this girl. So I hope you will enjoy this tutorial, and let's get started. As you can see, my layers palette here is not really that crowded with layers and adjustments, and I hope you will be able to follow this tutorial without any problems. We will start working with this portrait, but you can use any image that you want. I got this image from DeviantArt. It's a free image, but this is just for demonstration purposes only. You can use whatever image you want, and I will use this one. I just used two images, so inside the stock folder you'll have the original PSD file and these two images, which are the ones that I used for this tutorial. So I'll start by opening this image. So let's open this in Photoshop, and the first thing that I did is I masked the background and I extracted the woman from the background. So before I do that, I want to add the background to my image right away, because after you mask the woman, after you delete the background, you will be able to judge the selection on the hair a lot better if you have another background there. So in order to unlock the background, I'll alt double click the background, and now I'll control click the new layer icon and press Ctrl Command V to paste this image here. I will not change the size of it yet until I'm done cropping the woman. So let's rename this to woman, and this other one to background, and I'll select the woman layer for now, and I just use the quick selection tool to crop her from the background. And the way you do that is you select the quick selection tool and make sure you activate the auto enhance. This will create a more precise selection, and it's as simple as selecting while painting over the woman. This will create our rough selection right here. Don't worry too much about the hair and these areas here. We're gonna refine this in just a second, but make sure you make a pretty close rough selection around here, and with the alt key you can exclude areas that you don't want to have masked. And here I have to include this. I want to exclude this using the alt key and painting over those areas. And I think I'm gonna leave it like that, and I'm gonna click the layer mask icon now, and you can see the background is gone, and now we have our new background right there. We're not done yet. We have to to refine the edge here on the hair, but I want to move the image around the background so I have this sort of more illuminated area close to the hair right here, not too close. The reason why I used this background is obviously because I had this green background on the original image, and it makes a lot easier when it comes to masking. That's exactly why I added this new background right away. Now we have to refine the edge, and the way we are gonna mask the hair is using the refine edge. And I'm gonna right click on the layer mask and choose refine mask. I'm using Photoshop CC 2015, but if you have previous versions of Photoshop, you can do this as well. If you don't have the refine mask option, what you can do is control click the layer mask, then get the marquee tool and click the refine edge, and you'll get this same exact menu, but with a different name, but it's exactly the same panel. We're gonna do this in two stages. First, we're gonna refine and make sure that our edges here on the body are okay, and then we're gonna worry more about the hair. So First I'm gonna zoom in here and take a look at the edges right here, and I'm gonna shift the edge just a little bit, increase the feather about a pixel, and increase the contrast to sharpen those edges a little more, and maybe some smoothening, not too much. And I'm gonna click OK. The mask itself, the original mask, was okay, and if it's not really perfect because this background is pretty close to the original, the imperfections on the masking are not going to be that visible. The next thing I'm gonna do before I go on and work on the hair is I'm gonna blur this background. When you blur things, they become smoother, and imperfections on the layer mask will be more visible because there are not going to be any distractions there on the background, which usually help to mask those imperfections. So I'm gonna turn this into a smart object. I like to do this because I want to be able to control the amount of blur if I want to. And I'm gonna go to filter, blur, and well, I'm gonna go to the blur gallery and I choose fill blur. It's more realistic than the Gaussian blur, and let's say about 50 pixels of blur. It's okay, and I'm gonna click OK. Another reason for blurring the background is because it makes the model stand out a lot more, and it creates more drama on the image. Now, as you can see, the edges are pretty good. I'm not gonna touch them anymore here. We're just gonna have to worry about the hair. So let's click the refine mask again. So right click on the layer mask of the woman layer, refine mask, and here the only thing we want to do is paint over the hair like that, and let Photoshop do the job for us. It will start removing the background and keep the hair. So I'm gonna do just that right now. Okay, I think that's going to be fine. If you want to recover some areas, like for example here, just press and hold the Alt key and you can paint back areas that you want to recover, and that's it. You can try the smart radius option and try moving around this sliders here, but you'll have to be careful because this will also affect the rest of the edges here, so do that carefully. I'm gonna leave it like that and set the output to layer mask and click OK, and this is how the hair looks like. Now if you want to recover some fine details, what you can do is use the brush tool, and again, the fact that the background is pretty close to the original one, we can paint with a really low opacity and flow with white on this layer mask to recover the fine hairs. So let's try 30 and 30 and see how that looks. And make sure you use a soft brush and just paint like that, and you can recover some fine detail on the hair like that. Let's paint over there as well. Just make sure you blend them nicely. And this part, as you can see here, is more illuminated, and the background, the original background that we recovered using this low opacity brush, it's gonna be a bit darker. So in order to mask that, to blend it a little better, I'm gonna move the background slightly so that this darker part of the background is, well, right there where the hair is. So just move it so you can blend the images a bit better. And now probably I would yeah, right there, and with the layer, with another brush, I will probably paint back with black to just blend a bit better the edges and take away some of the effect. And we're done. That's how I masked the hair. I didn't want to go and make things very complicated. I'm not gonna mess with this too much here because it's not going to do much good. And I'm gonna select the layer mask now. I'll increase the hardness, opacity, and flow to 100%. And I wanna mask the hair a little better here. Maybe 100% is too well. The hardness is about 50, and this medium-sized brush. Just make sure you brush over the hair like that. If you want to create fine hairs, you can create a custom brush and paint some hairs over there. I don't have my pen, my graphic tablet pen, so with the mouse it's very complicated, so I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna leave it like that. It's pretty okay for this image. Now we have the base here. No more stock images were used to make this. The only thing that I'm gonna do now is make adjustments, and I'm gonna start with the woman, and I'm gonna create the first adjustment, which is a curves adjustment, and I'm gonna clip this by pressing the Alt key and putting the mouse between the two layers and clicking. You can also create that from the adjustment panel itself if you click this icon, and that way you can you only affect the woman layer and not the background. And here I just edited the blue and the green channels. For the blue, I have a couple of points here, one with input 43 and output 46, and then another point with input 179 and output 173. So I added a bit of yellow on the highlights. Take a look. On the woman's face especially, you can see that. And then I also changed the greens with, I just moved this lower left point. You can see that if you move this up, you add more green on the shadow, and then you gradually add less and less green as you go towards the highlights. And the output here that I set is 9. So I just added 9 on the greens. That way the woman has this greenish tone over her, which is a lot better for, she blends a lot better with the environment, which is this green background. Next, I added a color lookup, and as a clipping mask, and I used the edgy amber. Now if you use Photoshop CS3 or CS, I don't know if CS4 has this adjustment. This is a pretty new adjustment layer. So if you don't have this, you can try using a solid color and try one of the blend modes and try to get a similar look to this. And I set the blend mode of this to soft light, an opacity of 34% for this adjustment. And now we get this sort of golden tone, and mixed with that green that we added with the curves, we get a nice color cast on the woman. Then I added another color lookup, again clipped to the woman, and this time I used the 2-strip look, and I used the normal blend mode and an opacity of 59%. This removes some of that color, maybe even too much. Let's drop it to about 30, half of that. Yeah, 30 or 35. And next, a couple of gradient maps. The first one, I used the photographic toning. I used blue 2. So I used this gradient. The gradient is also included in the stock folder in case you use an older version of Photoshop and you don't have this presets. These are presets that come with Photoshop, but if you don't have them in the stock folder, you'll have the gradient, so you can install them in your version of Photoshop. And I set this to soft light. Important thing, I did not clip this to the woman layer, so I just left it there to affect everything, and set the blend mode to soft light and changed the blend mode to 24%. This increases the contrast and also gives it a bit of a colder tone. And then another gradient map, and this time I used one of the default gradients that come with all versions of Photoshop from CS2 including. So I'm gonna choose reset gradients, okay, and I'm gonna choose this this preset, and I'm gonna set the blend mode to soft light, but you can see it's too strong, it's way too strong. So I'm gonna drop the opacity to 45% or 43 or something like that. And I'm gonna remove some of that gradient from the woman's face. It's too strong. I just want this especially for the background. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the gradient tool from the left toolbar. Make sure I have the radial selected, and that you have black to white. I'm gonna click OK, and I'm gonna create a gradient. I will select the layer mask of this gradient map of this one, and on this layer mask I'm gonna create a radial gradient from her face up to about here. I have to reverse it because I want the black part to be inside. I want to remove some of this effect from the woman, from this face especially, and then gradually have this effect increasing. So I'm gonna drag from here to about right there. It's even too small. From her chest, more or less, from the middle of the canvas to about there. From a bit higher up. Let's do that again. Okay. Now, what happens here is that I removed the effect from the woman's face. You can see that if I deactivate the gradient map, the layer mask, sorry, but I removed it too much. In order to recover that, what you can do is double click on the layer mask, and in newer versions of Photoshop, including Photoshop CS5 and CS6, I think, I don't know if Photoshop CS4 or previous have this, but if you double click on the layer mask, you will open this panel and you'll see the density slider. And what you can do with this, I'm gonna activate the layer mask on the full screen so you can see it. What you can do with this is change the opacity of the layer mask, so to speak. So what you do is just make the layer mask a bit whiter, and what happens is that you let the effect show through this layer mask. By the way, I activated the layer mask on the full screen by pressing the Alt key and clicking on the layer mask. And take a look at her face, especially as I move the density slider and decrease the value of it. You can see I start to add more and more effect. Okay, so this way I can have less effect on the face of the woman, but I can still have the effect over the background. So for example, if I increase this to 60%, you can see the background is dark and has this tone, but I can remove the effect of the woman's face if I want to. So I'm gonna leave this back to 43 or 45 and just set the density to about 60%, 65 or something like that. And this is the effect that I got, and I'm not overdoing the effect of the woman's face. Now let's treat the skin a bit. I'm gonna use the mixer brush tool for that, as I usually do. So I'll create a new layer and I'll name this layer skin. If you like it how it is, you don't have to do this. The portrait is pretty nice already, but I wanted to smoothen it a bit. I like this sort of fantasy looking portraits. And I'm gonna click and hold the brush tool and I'm gonna select mixer brush tool. A couple of things here, just make sure you activate clean the brush after each stroke, and that you check the sample all layers, because we want to work non-destructively on a new layer without affecting the rest of the layers. And the settings that I have here are pretty much the same every time I use this on skin. Wet 20, load 18, mix 30 and float 20. And with this I work on pretty much all the images that I work with, and just start making, well, making strokes over the woman's face. The way you do this, if you're not familiar with my mixer brushing technique, is you have to follow the highlights and shadows to blend them and soften them. For example, you can see this shadow over here. I want to soften that, so I would click here and drag over it, and you can see how it starts to smoothen that. See that? I'm going to drag over that. And if you want to, for example, this really soft shadow, if you want to soften it and spread it a bit more, what you can do is, of course, I'm using a very soft brush. You click, for example, right here, drag, let go, and then click here and come back. So that's how I do this, just like painting a wall. You don't just click there once, hold the click and just do things like that. You're gonna start losing everything and creating really weird effects, which we don't want. Keep in mind, this is not a technique that keeps texture, so if you don't like this kind of effects, use the frequency separation technique, which keeps all the texture on the skin. But I like how this looks, so I'm gonna drop the opacity of this layer anyway. I just want to soften things a bit, make the shadows softer and blend the highlights and a bit the textures. The portrait itself is not a really high resolution image, so this will help increase a bit the quality once you zoom out. And one thing that I did for this particular image is also brush over the hair, and it's something that I usually don't do, but for this particular image I did. Make sure you follow the lines of the hair and the shadows and highlights of the hair, otherwise you will create some really weird effects, and we don't really want that. Okay, I'm gonna leave it like this. I want to show you the before and after. Well, I'm gonna brush a bit the eyes right here. This is really sensitive, so if you're not sure if you can do it, just don't touch it, because it can really ruin things really quickly. And if you remove the shadows from the wrong place, you can create some really ugly effects. So this is the before and after. You can see this makes people look a little younger and creates this soft effect. If it's too strong, just decrease the opacity of the layer. I'm gonna leave it to 85 just to see some of the original image through it. And that's it. The next thing that I'm gonna do is a really soft glow of light right there. So I created this new layer, which I'll name Glow. I'm gonna name it Glow 1 because we'll create another one a bit later on. And with the regular brush tool, if you press and hold the Shift key and click press the B key, you can cycle through the various tools on that on the toolbar. I'm gonna select the regular brush, hardness to 0, and increase the size a bit, something like that. I want to touch the woman a bit. And I'm gonna sample a color from right there, and now open the color picker, and I want something a bit more orange looking and a bit darker. We are going to use the screen blend mode. So the way the screen blend mode works is if you use a really dark colors, the effect is not going to be visible. So if you want less effect, use darker colors. It's a lot better than using a color like this, creating the effect and then dropping the opacity. The effect is not going to be the same. So use a darker tone instead, like this one. Let's see if it works. Yeah, I want something a bit more, something a bit brighter, like this. The brush a bit bigger, and something even brighter and more saturated. That's too much. Something like that. Even this is too strong and too saturated. And the brush a bit smaller. Yeah, I think that looks nice. I'm gonna make 2 clicks right there, and that's enough. The next thing that I want to do is use the oil paint filter. In Photoshop CC 2015, they included the oil paint filter again, but I cannot use it because I have to update my operating system, and I cannot activate it. It's inside the stylize oil paint right here, but you can see it's grayed out because I have to activate OpenGL, but my operating system does not allow me to do that. I have to update it, but I'll do that soon. And what I will do instead is I'm gonna select everything, and I'm going to go to Edit, Copy Merged, and I'm going to go to Photoshop CS6, which I still have installed, and I'm gonna paste my image right here and go to the oil paint filter right here. It's important to reduce the shine to 0. We don't want any 3D effects there. And the stylization settings that I use for this particular image are, let's say, about between 1.5 and 2, because this is not a really high resolution image. And the cleanliness, the more cleanliness you add, the more you like soften the image. You don't want to go too high, but about 3. And the scale and bristle detail will not gonna affect us, so I'm gonna leave that to whatever value it's there, and I'm gonna click OK. And I applied the oil paint filter. Now I'm gonna select everything again, Control X to just cut that and go back to Photoshop CC and paste this on top of everything. And I have to recover the highlights, because when you apply this filter you lose the highlights. So pressing Control Command L, you can see this missing part on this graph here. Here on the right we have the highlights, and here on the left we have the shadow. So I have to move this to the left to recover those highlights and click OK. Now the effect is too strong, so we have to create the layer mask and also drop the opacity of the layer, but let's name this oil. And first I want to create the layer mask and get the brush tool, and I will paint with black over the eyes because I want to remove the effect entirely of this area. I'm going to use a semi-hard brush and just paint over the eyes like that to remove the effect and see all the details that we have on the hair, on the eyes, like that. Also on the nose, so paint with black over the nose as well, and also over the lips, important. Recover the details on the lips, and right here let's leave it how it is. Okay, now I want to drop the opacity because the effect is still too strong over the rest of the image. So let's say about 65 or something like that, about 65%. If you take a look at the shirt, well, this dress and the hair, you can see how we smoothened the image a lot more. And this is an effect that I like. If you don't like it, just skip it and that's it, and just move on and add the rest of the effects that I'm gonna add now. And the next thing that I want to do is some dodging and burning. So I'm gonna shift click this new layer icon and I will name it Dodge Burn. And I'll change the mode to overlay and check the fill with overlay neutral color 50% gray, opacity 100%, and click OK. And it looks like nothing happened here on the canvas, but it's actually there. The only thing that happens is that with the overlay or soft light blend mode, 50% gray becomes invisible. But now we can use the dodge and the burn tools here on this layer non-destructively to enhance the highlights. I will fast forward here, but just to show you what I'm doing, I'm just painting over the highlights to enhance, well, the hair and some areas of the face, the eyes, and you can see this creases here and this folds on the dress. And that's what I'm gonna do, just enhance highlights with the dodge tool. So I'm gonna fast forward now, and when I'm done, I'm gonna show you what I did. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it like that. This is what I did with the dodge tool. You can create some really nice hair effects with this if you take your time. And let me show you the before and after. See all the highlights that I created here on the hair, and you can take a look at the dress as well. I increased the light effects there. Now I'm going to do the same with the burn tool. By the way, I had checking the protect tones, it does not make any difference, and also the range does not have any effect because we are painting on a neutral layer. We have no tones there, and also we have no, well, that's why I didn't, well, you can check or uncheck the protect tones, nothing will happen. I just forgot to enhance the eyes with this. I'm using a 30% exposure. You can use between 20 and 30, but the skin is really sensitive, so make sure you use a lower exposure for the skin. I didn't even touch the skin actually, but you can enhance the lips a bit maybe some parts of the nose here and some parts of the eyes here, just to make the shape of the eye stand out a little more. Some of the highlights here. Okay, I'm gonna leave it like that, and now I'm gonna switch to the burn tool, and I'm gonna do the opposite. Now I'm gonna brush over the shadows and dark midtones, and again I'm gonna have the range to midtones, and you can uncheck or check the protectants, that's up to you. And I'm gonna start with an exposure of about 20%, and I'm gonna change depending on the areas. And as you can see, I'm trying to enhance the shadows here and increase the local contrast on some places. And that's it. I'm gonna fast forward again and show you the result when I'm done. Okay, I'm not gonna go further. This is what I did. This is what I did with the dodge and burn. Again, with this tool, you don't want to overdo the effect because it's really easy to mess up. And I've seen a lot of photos with so much dodging and burning that it actually hurts to the eye. So don't really do that unless you really want to do it. But it's better to use lower exposures and make fine adjustments. And if you really want a stronger effect, you can just duplicate this dodge burn layer as many times as you want. You start to see how badly it looks. And this is not what I want. I just want to enhance a bit highlights and shadows, and that's it. Let's move on. And the next thing that I want to do is use the camera raw as a filter. So I'm gonna stamp everything. I'm gonna merge everything into a new layer, and you can do that using a keyboard shortcut. You can press Shift, Alt, Control, or Command E, and this will merge all the layers onto a new layer. And I'm gonna name this raw for camera raw. And in Photoshop CC, you can use camera raw as a filter. If you cannot do that, you'll have to go to your preferences on your Photoshop, and here on file handling, go to camera raw preferences, and on JPEG and TIFF handling, change the JPEG to automatically open all supported JPEGs. Then save a copy of this image with the original size as a JPEG, and then open it in Photoshop, and it will automatically open it with camera raw. I'm gonna convert this into a smart object. It will open it with camera raw, and you'll have the same thing that I have here. And then when you're done, after you apply the filter, you can save that and then open it back and put it as a layer on your canvas. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna move this. I'm gonna change the white balance, basically. Change the tint here. I don't have the exact values because I did not use a smart object when I created the original image, and I couldn't recover the values that I got. So I'm gonna do it again here. Reduce the clarity. This will smoothen the whole image even more. If you increase it, you can create this sort of burnt sort of HDR looking image, which is not what I want. I want a soft effect. Maybe increase a bit the contrast slightly. A bit of light on the shadows, not too much. You can see this part of the dress is very dark. And what else? What we can do here? Maybe a bit colder tone. Temperature -18 and tint to -10, just to add even more green on the image. I'm gonna increase the vibrance a bit and also the saturation. It's too much. Saturation will affect a lot more the image, while the vibrance will only affect the strongest colors, greens and blues, blues and yellows especially. And I'm gonna leave it like that. On split tone, I want to add some yellow on the highlights. I'm gonna increase the saturation and set the hue to about 47. And on the shadows, I want to have this sort of cyan tone there, maybe more towards green. but I'll change the balance more towards the highlights a bit. Let's see if that works. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it like that, I think. Something like that. And then I want to go to the effects and add some post-crop vignetting. I want to set the midpoint to the lowest, maybe about 10. And the roundness, I want to increase it. Otherwise, what you will get is this sort of, see that, this triangular, this rectangular, sorry, shape, which is not what I want. I want to have a round vignette, because the woman is standing right here, and I want this round effect. Maybe it's too much, -15. There's something that I don't like about the temperature, I think. I'm gonna leave it there and see what we get. And let's say about maybe the exposure a bit higher. And the blacks just a little more. I'm gonna leave it like that, and these are the settings that I have. But again, this is up to what you like, really. It's not, this is what I liked, and that's how I made it that way. See the before and after. Before camera raw and after camera raw as a filter. So this is the image that I got. And next, just a couple of other adjustments. I still have to add another glow of light. I'll create a new one, a new layer, and I'm gonna name it Glow 2. And again, I'm gonna use the screen blend mode. I'm gonna sample a color from here using the brush tool. When you're using the brush tool, if you press the Alt key, you can switch to the eyedropper tool, and you can sample colors. Again, I'm gonna use a brown tone like that, but this time I'm gonna use a bigger brush, something like this, and click there, but it's too strong. I just want to tint a soft glow of light, like probably like that, even more subtle like this. Yeah, that's a lot better, but I want a softer brush like so. Yeah, that's a lot better. And now another adjustment layer. I'm gonna add the gradient map because I want some other tones. I'm gonna use this one again, and let's say color, and drop the opacity to, let's say, 10% or maybe a bit more. Yeah, you get this zone here. You can try others, for example, soft light, if you want to increase the contrast a bit, but I think I like more the color. And at 20% it's okay. And the next thing that I will add is another color lookup, and this time from the abstract here I'll choose the cobalt carmine. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. And here I will change the blend mode of this to, well, I'll leave the blend mode to normal, and I'll set the opacity to 34%. And this is the effect that we get. Now, as a final touch, a hue saturation adjustment, and increase the saturation a bit, but it's too strong over the face. I like what it does on the background, but I don't like what it does on the woman's face. So I'll use this layer mask to paint with black over the face and the hair to remove the effect, like that. And that's it. And if you want to add back some of that, you can use the density filter, the density slider again, and you can recover some of that color. If you don't like the color of the face, you can change a bit, well, the tone here, well, the hue, sorry, and get another tone if you want. So, well, that's the effect. We're done. I'm gonna take a screenshot so you can see the before and after, and another one. So this is the original image, and this is what we ended up with. Original, and this is what we ended up with. Original and final result. I think it's a pretty nice effect, and it looks pretty nice. If you want to add even more vignetting, you'll get a more dramatic effect, but I think it looks pretty nice. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I would like to see your results. If you upload your images on Instagram, use the hashtag PSDBox, and I usually feature nice images on our gallery, so you can try that if you want to. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.